Can we start with seeking out the talent for these different stories? How do you go about that? What's the process? And is there anyone you're looking to try to grab for future episodes?
Yes, well, the talent started with Aaron Mahnke, and that relationship started by me reaching out to him on Twitter right when the podcast came out. I loved it. I think he was the kind of linchpin that helped get this whole thing started. You know, as I got to know Aaron and the first time he came out and I had the opportunity to introduce him to Gail, I've remained inspired by what he has built and what he's still building and like his process. Aaron, like the rest of us, and especially this one here, he's a big geek, you know? And like, I love what he does and how he works. And the success, I think when I originally reached out to him, the podcast only had a few thousand downloads. Now it's got over 100 million, right? And so his success and that trajectory enabled us to attract talent like this one. She was a fan of the podcast.
Yeah, it was. I was just excited that I love podcasts and the fact that we're putting content that was from a radio show to a television show. That's a fun leap that we just haven't discovered, you know, really. Haven't really discovered yet. And so this is one of the first platforms, and I was one of the first on scripted television for MTV, and that worked out okay. So I'm really just grateful to be a part of something new, and that's something that excites me. I also love a true story. This is a nonfiction story. All scary stories truly are real. I do believe that. I've never been a jump scare kind of girl. It's always, the psychological is always what gets me at the end of the day. And the fact that she was this independent woman in the 1890s in Ireland, and what happens to her. I love that Bridget was one of the last cases in Ireland with changelings. And her case and changed, where her husband was persecuted for what he did to her. And I appreciate that. Yeah. So, I mean, at least that she was the face that changed. And for that, I hope I honor her in the way that, you know, she would have liked.
Also, in terms of recruiting talent, it helps to have Ben Silverman, who knows everyone and has made so many great shows like Jane the Virgin and Ugly Betty and The Office. It helps to have Gail Ann Hurd, who seems to continually pull more hits than everyone else in the universe combined out of her hat. I mean, she inspires me every day I get to hang out with her. Glenn Morgan, who made X-Files, like, it helps as a producer like myself to be able to call and say, oh, I'm working with Gail and Glenn and Ben and Howard. Like, it makes my job easier. And then you combine that with a successful podcast and New Voice, like, it gets a lot easier. You know, in future seasons, if the show is a success and Amazon and the fans want us to come back, I think, you know, we'll find whoever works for the story and is inspired to work with us. I mean, I think if the fans want to tell us who they'd love to see in the roles, I'd love to hear that too. Yeah.
For me, I also am a huge YouTube educated actor. I love the master classes. Like, I just love finding stuff on my computer. I tend to, you know, that's usually where I end up in the rabbit hole. And so for me, it was Googling pictures of Bridget Cleary, Googling towns near Tipperary. How are they different from Tipperary? Tipperary was in the south. How is that different from the north? The fashion around that time was, like you were saying, like different from the U.S. I wanted to look at that because I think that all comes into play of how you're going to carry yourself in an audition. And you sit a little straighter and you sort of move in a bit more of a graceful way than I do in 2017. And so those are the kinds of things that I did. It's more just percolating of what inspires you. So it's not even really like reading a book in its entirety. It's just reading certain chapters. Or for me, my process is just kind of reading a piece and like sitting with it and seeing how it affects you and how that manifests itself into a character. So a lot of mine's just like sitting in with like weird looks on my face, like trying to process things. That's kind of my odd process. Yeah. So, yeah.
The first time I heard the podcast, immediately I thought this should be a TV show. Immediately, right? And in the beginning, I think the things that are occurring to you that you mentioned are the things I think that occur to fans when they're listening. They occurred to me too. I was just like, wow, there's so many ingredients here. And sometimes like less is more. Sometimes you're like, you don't want onions and tomatoes and every single ingredient on your sandwich, right? You just want cheese and bread or whatever. But when we were starting to put together lore, like, it just felt like there was a way to maybe explored documentary and scripted television and mixed media all kind of at the same time. So all those boxes we tried to check, but then we thought, well, like, how the heck do we do this? It hasn't really ever been done. You know, there have been other programs that you might call a hybrid, but they usually include talking heads, right? So if you see a piece about another planet, or you see a piece about something historical, then there's, you know, a group of usually older men who tell you what you just saw, and we didn't want to do that. And so instead, in the documentary segments, we use Aaron's voice to guide you like he does on the podcast, and that is kind of was our base. We started there and then wrote the scripts and then kept researching the documentary segments. And sometimes we started to dig around and we thought we knew what the doc segment would be. And then when we found something scary and more horrifying, you know, we thought we knew what the first American vampire was. And then, you know, we really dug into the story where a guy, you know, digs up his daughter and tears out her heart and burns it and puts it in a glass and drinks it to save his son. Like, that's insane. Somebody really did that, right? And if you look at humanity, and I think all the scary movies around that we've all loved and cherished and have posted on our wall, usually they came from a true story, right? Something that really happened. Lore is the show that goes to the source and it brings those original archetypes to life.
One of my goals is to produce documentaries, but when you're producing a documentary, you are sculpting the story. You are the script. So if you're not a writer, you better have some artistic writing talent. It's somewhere in your body of plot, because you're sculpting everything from scratch. There is no script to go off of. So for this particular piece, I loved that idea of trying to make a documentary. So you have to build that part from scratch from his podcast, and then, you know, where do you choose to put the narrative, you know, points in? Where do you choose to say, I'm going to tell the Bridget story, not the Annie Get Your Gun story? And so I found that interesting, of what they chose to tell us the main plot A narrative portion that's scripted, that brings in the actors, and where they chose to do animation and where they chose to do found footage. And so that's what I found interesting. And I started, of course, as an actor, you're like, wait, I kind of want to be Annie Get Your Gun though. And it's like, I wish I could have been both. Like you know, you just go into narcissistic, you know, unicorn role of all the kinds of different what ifs that you could be in. But I think that's what the viewer will probably go through too, is as soon as you're getting sucked in by this story, then this story, and then, you know, it'll wrap back around later in the episode. So it reads like, I love you know, the PBS and documentaries, and I love like I was saying earlier, the Jinx and the Keepers. And so I get to watch a scripted piece that has all the elements of storytelling that I like, and the fact that it mixes it up. And so even as an actor, I'm like, well, but wait, can I play that part too and that part too? You know, and so I think hopefully the viewer will go on that same ride where they connect with a lot of different parts of the story. It's not just, oh, the animation's on the side and the A plot's truly the A plot. I think it all creates, you know, the story of women that were empowered at times in society where they, you know, we're not normally empowered. That was the theme of my episode, and so it was exciting to see that medium on television and even told in that way.